You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. Love that we have Jordan Schultz in the house, the terrific NFL insider who's been breaking news left and right. We're less than 2 weeks away from the NFL trade deadline, so perfect time to talk to Jordan and find out exactly what's going on, separate fact from fiction for some of these potential trades that are being floated about, some of these guys that might be available. Before we get to Jordan, a couple things. Number one, we'll have a spread the word winner via social media. So that's someone that engages with at Ross Tucker NFL or especially at Ross Tucker Pod on any of the platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We'll have a sponsor confirmation email winner. So take advantage of any of the sponsors you hear on the show or go to the sponsors page at rosstucker.com. And then I love the YouTube shout out, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Subscribe, comment on any video. Your comment can literally be, I just want a cameo style video shout out from Ross. Speaking of shout outs, Alexander Kraft is the patron of the day, patreon.com/RT Media. That's how you become a part of the Tuckheads private Slack channel family and get the even money bets spreadsheet, the vaunted even money bets spreadsheet. Speaking of shout outs, just want to give the shout out to the Philadelphia Phillies for a really, really cool experience. Took my daughters last night. It was actually their first Phillies game that we went to last night. Not a lot of sleep for your boy, but that's okay. It was so worth it. And that's going to be my word of wisdom today. When in doubt in life, do it. You know, I mean, it's not ideal on a Tuesday night. They had to miss their activities. They're going to be tired for school today. I'm tired for my shows today. There was a lot of traffic with all the events, all that stuff. It was so worth it. It was a life memory for them forever and a life memory for me forever. Really, really cool environment, cool experience. That's my word of wisdom. If you're not sure whether or not you should do something with your family or friends, when in doubt, do it. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Well, as mentioned, we are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL trade deadline. So I wanted to bring on one of the best insiders in the business. He's been on the show before, has an awesome background, awesome story. His name is Jordan Schultz. Check out all of his stuff. Probably the best way is social media, at Schultz_report on Twitter, at Jordan Schultz on IG, and at Real Jordan Schultz on TikTok. We got to get all those the same, Jordan. Like, I can't be giving out 3 different handles. You know what I mean?
I know. You're not the first person that told me that. My wife told me that. My sister told me that. The problem is that you can't get all 3 because they're taken. So until further notice, unfortunately, that's my reality.
No, I got it. I'm just messing with you. All right, so with the trade deadline's a little less than 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
So I like to try to get ahead of it a little bit as much as we can. I guess the first question, it feels like, you know, for the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks, we've been hearing rumors about the Broncos, the Vikings, the Panthers. I mean, do you get the sense that this will be a more or less active trade deadline than usual or about the same?
I think it's going to be slightly more, with the thought process being that because several teams, a lot of the teams, believe that there are incredibly gifted generational signal callers. I mean, that's a long way of saying we have incredibly talented quarterbacks in this class. So it's not just Caleb Williams. It's Michael Penix. It's Drake May. There's a lot of guys that really stand out. And I think everyone's going to jockey to get that number 1 pick with Caleb Williams, which means you could have teams, quote unquote, tanking. And as a result of it, you're going to see a lot of movement. I've had several NFL clubs tell me that they could see this being one of the busier trade deadlines, with the thought process being that because teams want Caleb Williams, because teams want Drake May, maybe a Michael Penix, they're gonna move up or try to move assets and try to essentially tank.
Wow, that is interesting. But it makes sense, right? I mean, there's nothing more. Like, just look at the Houston Texans, right? Like, you get a quarterback that looks like they're the real deal early. It's like gold, man. It's unbelievable. And if it's funny because you don't really have to do anything to get them other than lose.
Yeah, I think CJ Stroud. I wonder if you look back at the last 6 months, the pre-draft process with Stroud, and there was that report saying that he struggled, pre-draft with it wasn't the Wonderlic, it was other testing, mental aptitude. And everyone was saying, well, CJ Stroud, maybe he's not the guy. And you heard that take over the draft process. Then he comes in, and through the first month, he sets the record for throws without an interception. His yardage is remarkable. The guy looks like $1 million. He looks like the real deal. He has single-handedly changed the Texans' compass. They are now pointing strictly north. They have done a great job with him. And I think he's the guy that teams look at and say, if we can get one of those, then we'll be good. Because Houston has been utterly rudderless really over the last decade. And now they get who they believe is their franchise cornerstone. And now they look like a potential playoff team. So that's what teams look at with Caleb Williams. They see him, and I know he struggled against Notre Dame, Ross, but they see Caleb Williams and they say, if we can get one of those, we're good. Everything else will fall into place. And that's why I think you're going to see a pretty hectic trade deadline.
Jordan, you're way late on this. He had a bad game against Notre Dame. He stinks now. Like you're totally he had one bad game, so now he stinks. You got to pay attention, man. Things move fast. And you're on TikTok. You should know this. Things move fast in the media world. It makes me laugh. Like, you're not allowed to have one bad game. And then people start, now Drake May's better than him.
He just, because I didn't see it. I know I saw the highlights. He made 3 terrible interceptions, but was it a scheme thing or what happened?
No, he's not. He wasn't that bad. I mean, it wasn't a good game for him, but he set the bar so high. Yeah. They don't have a great O-line. Their defense stinks. He's like running around. I mean, some of the plays he makes are crazy. Now people have a problem because he does too much stuff out of structure.
Right.
When every time people love when Mahomes and Josh Allen do stuff out of structure, the whole thing, it's what do they call it? Paralysis by overanalysis, I think, at times. Let's dive into some of these teams, though, because it is interesting, the teams that are being rumored a lot. Let's start with the Vikings, who are just fascinating. They did get their second win against the Bears. It wasn't pretty, but Justin Jefferson, who knows when he's coming back, man, with this injury, and he never got the contract he wanted. And it already felt like this offseason with Thielen and with Zadarius Smith that it's like the Vikings almost went into this year, Jordan, with a self-analysis or self-scout saying, we weren't really as good as we were last year. We won every close game. And maybe they were right. So there's a lot of chatter about their guys. So why don't we start with the big one, Cousins, and other guys you think, might have a chance to be moved by Minnesota?
My stance on Cousins has been the same for a while, that because he has the no trade clause and because he's set to hit free agency, it would behoove him to stay in Minnesota. If he has to go to, hypothetically, another team and learn a playbook over the course of a month or a few weeks and then play out the rest of the season, that's not going to serve him well in free agency. I highly doubt he'll be a Minnesota Viking after this season, but I also highly doubt he's going to get traded because I don't see him waving. I don't understand how that helps him. And ultimately, I know he's been in Minnesota. He's had great success there, but I do think both sides will move on after the season. They have a 2-game stretch now, or a couple games now coming up, including with San Francisco, where you see a pretty hard path to them winning. They don't have Justin Jefferson. You have to wonder, Ross, if they were to lose a couple more in a row if they go into panic mode and just become full-on sellers. And if that's the case, does Justin Jefferson even return this season? What's the benefit to him returning if he doesn't have his contract, which I think he should have gotten, and if they're not winning games? So there's a lot of uncertainty with Minnesota. Danielle Hunter is a guy that has played outstanding football for a long time, especially this season again. Has a reasonable contract. He'll be a free agent. KJ Osborne will be a free agent. And again, Harrison Smith wants to be in Minnesota. He's much older now at this stage in his career, but I can see all of those guys, or one or two of those guys, I should say, getting moved.
The issue is, like for Hunter, he's going to get a lot of money in free agency. So he'll be like a third-round compensatory pick, essentially, for the Vikings.
Yeah.
So you got to give more than that. And if you're going to give more than that, are you going to make sure you want to sign him to a new contract now? Because if you're giving up more than a third-round pick, then you want to make sure you're securing this guy for a few years. And I feel like that really complicates things because Hunter's going to want a boatload of money. And it's hard to do those deals, I feel like, sometimes in a really short window.
Correct. But trading him would save them over $8 million. And that's a key factor here. Cap always comes down. It's always important to save money when you can, especially when you're not going to be a playoff team. Hunter's probably their most valuable guy right now that's actually on the field. He's really been, he's been one of their better players for a while. And so he signs a 1-year deal worth $17 million. A comp pick, you said it's a third rounder?
Well, given what he would get in free agency, yes, it would be a third round pick. He would get a ton of money, so he'd be at the very top of the comp pick list. Yeah.
The other team that's really interesting to me is Washington. They've been so up and down week to week. I never really know what to make of them. I don't know what to make of Ron Rivera. It's very hard to predict what they're going to do. But they do have two guys essentially playing the same position, and Montez Sweat and Chase Young, both represented by Clutch Sports. And I don't know if Washington's going to be able to pay both of those guys, So that's another really fascinating one because they have great value. I think both could command a 2 or a 3. But the fact that you're not going to be able to likely pay him means that you could see a scenario where one gets moved.
So what's interesting to me about that is, like, Ron Rivera needs to win this year. So I always think that, like, how does he benefit from trading one of those guys now if I believe he needs to win this year to have any chance to come back with the new owner, right?
Yeah, I would be surprised if let me rephrase that. Ron Rivera's got one of the hotter coaching seats in the league. I think he knows it, and I think new ownership really wants to put their fingerprints on the organization to be sustainable. Dan Snyder ran this franchise into the ground for decades. They've been irrelevant when lost. They've been irrelevant from a brand. They haven't had any tangible success. So the new ownership group wants so badly to have sustainability. And if you're not going to be able to pay both guys, then it, from a sustainability standpoint, makes sense to move on from one and, get significant draft capital. That's really all I'm saying.
All I'm saying, Jordan, is that Labatt Blue Light is absolutely delicious. And that's what I'll be having this weekend, even Thursday night when I'm watching Thursday Night Football. Drink some Labatt Blue Lights like I do with my friends. I actually will be drinking for sure tomorrow night, Labatt Blue Light with my friends. I might even be drinking the Labatt Blue Light with a Hall of Famer. Check my social media at Ross Tucker NFL. Always enjoy responsibly beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Jordan, what about the team that's been maybe talked about the most?
Denver.
And that's the Denver Broncos. There's been reports about them being willing to move guys. And they just kind of got rid of Randy Gregory and Frank Clark. It's weird what's going on right now in Denver.
That's a team that is open for business, Ross. That's how it's been described to me. They are open for business. And, they're not going to trade Russell Wilson, okay? But you look down that roster, and there's just a lot of names there that you could see being moved. First of all, you have the receivers. You have Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Now, it seems like they've been on the trade block for a year. Last year, I thought Denver could have moved Jeudy, but they really wanted a one in return. They're not going to command that now for Jeudy or Sutton, but I could absolutely see one of them being moved. Denver has been a disaster. Okay, so the new head coach, Sean Payton, he comes in, he's supposed to be the Russell Wilson quarterback whisperer. It hasn't really played out. I know Wilson's stats are better, but the team has not improved. If anything, they've gotten worse. And I think Sean Payton, it's his show now with respect to George Payton, the GM. Sean Payton, it's his show. And if he wants something done, it's going to get done. So to me, really go down that roster. The only guy that should be untouchable is Patrick Surtain. He should be untouchable. He's a franchise cornerstone in his third year. He's an all-pro at a premium position. He should be untouchable. But everyone else, to me, could be available. And that includes Garrett Bowles. That includes both receivers. So there you have it. Denver's open for business.
The other team that's interesting to me, Jordan, just because of how it's playing out right now, is the Tennessee Titans, because 2 years in a row, they've taken one of the highly touted quarterbacks, which is interesting. Now, they've gotten him in the second and third round. Now here we find out Tannehill has another high ankle sprain. Now, they have a bye this weekend. Then they have a game. Then they go to the trade deadline. It kind of felt like this offseason, they were doing the balancing act between trying to win this year, but trying to get ready for the post-Tannehill era. Do you think that they could do anything at the trade deadline?
Tennessee feels like that team in limbo where it's like, are we gonna make a playoff push this season, or are we just gonna move on to next season? So you mentioned Tannehill having the high ankle, which is tough. You have Levis, you have Willis. They have a lot. They have trade assets. I mean, Derrick Henry is a viable trade asset, to say the least. The question for Tennessee now is, you have a new GM, a first-year GM in Rand Carthen. You have Mike Vrabel. Both of those guys are really competitive. Carthen's background is scouting. He comes from San Francisco, where obviously they had a lot of success. They built around the quarterback. They built around the offense. Tennessee seems like a team that could absolutely be aggressive. It's my understanding in talking to teams around the league, though, that this next week or 2 weeks now is going to be really important for them. It's the same thing with, I would equate it to Minnesota, where both those teams had relatively high expectations of being a playoff contender. Now they're getting into close to the trade deadline, where they don't really necessarily, or if we don't necessarily see a path toward the playoffs, do we become sellers? And I think this next game for Tennessee is really important as a result. I would equate that to Minnesota.
He is killing it on the insider trail these days. Make sure you're checking him out like I do on social media. At Schultz_report is Twitter. Jordan Schultz on IG. At Real Jordan Schultz on TikTok. Jordan, thank you so much for the time and coming on the show, man. Great to talk with you again. It'll be fun over the next couple of weeks, see how it plays out. We'll be following your posts.
My pleasure, Ross. Thank you, bro.
Love talking with Jordan Schultz and getting the updated info, just like I love the fact that you can learn a language in as little as 10-minute lessons from Babbel. So I know a lot of people go on vacation internationally over the holidays. Maybe it's between Christmas and New Year's. I know people do that. Can't recommend Babbel highly enough. My daughters and I and my wife, we took a few of the lessons before we went to Ecuador, and the Galapagos Islands helped tremendously. It's designed by real people for real conversations, and it's bite-sized segments, bite-sized lessons, which I love. Here's a special limited time deal for my listeners to get you started right now. Get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/Ross. Get 55% off at babbel.com/Ross, spelled BABBEL, HOPENY.com/Ross. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, we'll start. Flag football will be in the Olympics in 2028.
This is huge. So huge, Jack. I'm going to make it my Labatt take of the day. Presented by Labatt Blue Light, the pristine Canadian Pilsner. Enjoy your beers together so you can live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. I absolutely love the fact that flag football is going to be in the Olympics. First of all, I never played flag football in my life, and I love what it's done for our country and internationally in terms of the growth of American football. I go to some of my friends' kids or my nephew's flag football games. There are kids playing flag football as far as the eyes can see in every direction. I love it because it introduces young people to football without having to worry about the contact or the collisions and the helmet and the shoulder pads and that stuff. Some people aren't into that, and that's totally fine. If you want to just play flag football, that's great. If you do want to eventually play tackle football, it's a great introduction into tackle football. You get to catch the ball. You don't have to worry about being a lineman when you're younger. I think it's wonderful, and it's in like 100 countries now, 20 million people. It's growing the sport internationally. I love everything about this.
The NFL approves new procedure for in-person interviews NFL approves new procedure for in-person interviews of coaches employed by other teams.
Right. So what they're saying now is they want to not have any interviews for assistant coaches who are in the playoffs until after the divisional round. They're trying to slow down the process, and they want to not have these teams in the first couple of the rounds, affected by their assistant coaches interviewing for head coaching jobs or worried about that. They don't like the process. I get that. What I don't understand is most of the people are going to want to interview guys that are on the best teams that are in the conference championship game. So how does it solve that issue? Number one. Number two, all you're really probably doing here is asking for tampering like crazy, because people are still going to want to try to get an edge and get a head start on the candidate or candidates that they really are interested in.
The NFL is trying to define the hip drop tackle so that they can ban it.
Going to be hard to define it. I'll be curious to see how they do it. You already can't horse collar. Now we'll see how they define the hip drop tackle. I understand the goal, and maybe if they can define it and teach it and penalize guys, maybe they'll do a better job of not doing it. I don't know.
Rams defensive back Darian Kendrick was arrested on felony gun possession, and Colts nose tackle Grover Stewart was suspended 6 games under PED policy.
Yeah, that's problematic for both teams. I think Kendrick was starting for the Rams at corner, and Grover Stewart's one of the underrated, really, really good defensive tackles in the NFL. That's a big loss for the Colts. Here's the deal. We're in the fourth quarter of this podcast. Fourth quarter is where the magic happens. It's where games are won, where champions are made. In business, it's where sales teams become legends. That's why HubSpot built Sales Hub, to give sales reps the deal-making tools they need to win their Q4. Sales Hub's prospecting workspace organizes your schedule, goals, and to-do list in one place to save your team precious fourth quarter time. And Smart Sequences help sales reps close deals faster than ever. So get ready to dominate Q4 with Sales Hub. Learn more at HubSpot.com/sales.
Eagles signed wide receiver Julio Jones and defensive back Josiah Scott.
Right. Plus, the Packers signed running back James Robinson. And the Rams, I think, signed 3 running backs. Myles Gaskin, Royce Freeman, Darrell Henderson. That's because their top 2 guys, Ronnie Rivers as well as Kyron Williams, are both injured. Packers need to have some depth there. The Eagles, well, first of all, they're so ravaged by injury at safety and at nickel. Josiah Scott was there in camp. He knows the system. So that makes a lot of sense to me. The Julio Jones one, I think, is because Quez Watkins went on IR, and they know they're kind of one guy away from having an issue there. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout outs, myfrontpagestory.com. Guys, the holidays are like 2 months away. Get on it now. Knock it out. myfrontpagestory.com, backofficeschedule.com, go-bengals.com, steakhousesports.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, and Pizza Boy Brewing.